MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com. Expand your skills. Improve yourself. Get a free 10-day trial of all lynda.com has to offer at lynda.com/MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Notables on MacVoices. This is the Talk to the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been a long time since we had a chance to talk to Bryan Chaffin, and we're going to rectify that problem right now. Bryan?
Hey, is that Chuck?
Yes. Who?
Chuck, is that you?
Yeah.
Hey, man. Hey, everybody, it's Chuck.
Yeah, don't start.
Man, Chuck is the best.
It's good to see you. That's a private little joke that only Bryan and I won't really fully understand.
Oh, it's me and you and maybe a few thousand of your closest friends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a few thousand of your closest friends, too.
Really?
Our closest friends.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
How's that? Good.
Fair.
Good. It's good to see you. How things going?
It's good to see you, too. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has been. I don't know where the time goes.
I could start ticking off things.
Yeah.
And that's where all the time goes.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
It does.
So I guess I should ask about the novel before we dig into today's topics, because that's what we always do. We check in and see how the novel writing and selling is going.
I am querying the novel. I've sent out 6 queries since October, but really I've sent out 4 queries in the last week. So I'm very much stepping up my querying.
Good.
And I haven't gotten any nibbles yet. This stuff takes time.
It does indeed.
Hopefully the next time we talk, actually, I will have somewhat of a better update.
Good. Well, that's okay. You're to the querying stage. So does that mean, at least in our minds, that the book is officially finished, put to bed, no more edits?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
The reason why I started querying in October and stopped because I was messing around with the ending, just tweaking little things, just like it wasn't quite right. And then I finally got it where I wanted it. And I'm actually reading through the beginning right now because when you're querying, you send out the beginning. Most of the time, if they're going to request any material, it's going to be the first 5 pages, 10 pages, 30 pages, 5 chapters, 3 chapters, that sort of thing. So I definitely want to make sure that my beginning is up to snuff with the end, which I've actually been obsessing on for months now. So it's done. It's done, but it's possible I will still edit a word or two.
We've talked about this before, Bryan, that most of us aren't experienced in the process you're going through. If I stop and think about it, it makes perfect sense that they would be looking for the first few chapters because you want to see if somebody can start and get hooked into the storyline and the characters and all that. So, but I never really thought about that part until just this second.
Most of the time, what they're looking for, they really want to know that you can write. But how you grab someone from the beginning is also certainly important. But it's funny you say that because even writers who are querying, people who haven't done their research, will send in chapter 7 because, quote, it's my best chapter. And I mean, I can't tell you how many agents I've heard tell stories about that, and either with a laugh or a groan or a roll of the eyes. And so it isn't necessarily intuitive that they absolutely want to see the very beginning, but that is how that works.
Interesting. Every time you show up, I learn something.
Man, the publishing process is it's a pain, and it's hard, and it's complex, and it requires a lot of research. I personally read up every single interview that I can with if I'm going to query an agent, I'm going to read everything I can find on the internet from them, because if I can learn that one little tiny thing that will give me a leg up with them, I want to do that. And it does mean that querying for me is slow, but it's the only way that I can personally be happy doing it, because I need to feel like I'm doing everything that I can.
And I can understand that, not just from the idea that you want to sell the book, but also just I think a lot of us have that element of control that we want to have control. We want to have as much control as we can get, even though we may not have any. We want to at least give ourselves the illusion that we have it.
Well, a lot of people just want to blast out queries. They just want to like, send out 100. They don't care if the agent even represents. They don't care enough to bother to find out whether or not the agent represents the genre that they're writing in. And so not everybody wants that control. A lot of people just don't. A lot of people don't think about it. So, and the whole thing with querying, you want to be not. I mean, I'd like to think my book is at least in the top 3 percentile. But to get published, you probably need to be in the top percentile, and maybe even a fraction of that. Because there's still a lot of people who are writing books. It's never been easier to write a book ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an interesting process. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of agony, and it's an ongoing thing for me.
Well, the other parallel, and folks, we're off. We're way off of where we were going to go anyway to start. But I think there's some parallels in something else we've talked about, and some of our friends have talked about, and that is press releases and promotional queries. And I think it's interesting that you're trying not to do to the agents what some developers do to you, to me, to everybody at the Mac Observer and all the other Apple news sites. They just blast and hope that somebody will pick it up. Dear Mr. or dear site owner or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's no qualification of what they're sending you. So I mean, sorry, but if a game developer sends me something, they've wasted all those electrons because it's just not something I do. So that's a small example, but it's amazing.
This is where I told you before that I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. Right?
Oh yeah.
And this is actually one of those. The querying process is one of those things where being a jack of all trades and not. I mean, I'm not the best writer on the planet. Pretty good, but I'm not the best writer on the planet. And I've gotten a lot of great help from some amazing people that have helped me make my novel to be probably really good at this point. Wasn't always, and it's been a process, right? And my point is that, but when it comes to the querying side, there are so many things that you have to do that I actually feel like being a jack of all trades has been a bit of a benefit. And I think that for a lot of developers, they're not jacks of all trades. They're good coders or they're good designers, but that doesn't mean they know how to interact with people. It doesn't mean they understand the notion of building relationships and how to reach out, and the fact that it's actually important that you understand who you're sending your message to. I mean, each one of those things is a completely different skill set than what it takes to be a good developer. And so, yeah, I mean, and what you were talking about in terms of getting seemingly random press releases from people is, I think, a result of that fact.
Yeah, but when they come from PR people that at least then I think those people should know better. That they should try to qualify. I mean, you and I are both probably on 10 dozen lists of some kind, and the fact that some of those lists we are probably very qualified to be on. Others we have no business on, but it doesn't seem to matter.
I take great delight in deleting press releases of new Android apps. I'm enjoying the process of deleting this. Bink.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't usually talk about rumors here, and I don't think that this is really a rumor. I wouldn't consider it a rumor, so I'm just going to...
It's a rumor.
I'm going to label it as rampant speculation. Because you wrote an article as we record this a few days ago, and it just got picked up and has gotten a lot of attention. And that is that you feel that there are some real good reasons that Apple may be developing a self-driving car.
Didn't say self-driving. I said a car.
Okay, a car. All right. I think there's an implication there.
Not necessarily.
Really?
Yeah, not necessarily. Self-driving cars are inevitable, and when that day comes when every car is self-driving, that will be a good thing for the world. We're still a long way out from that, and I think that Apple will probably release an electric car before it releases a self-driving car. And like one of the things what Business Insider ran a piece saying that someone identifying themselves as an Apple employee told them that that they were working on something that was going to, quote, give Tesla a run for its money, and unquote. And that's not self-driving cars; those are electric cars. But I have already been working for more than a week, actually closer to 2 weeks. I had already been working on this exact same story because I had learned that Apple's been poaching the kind of people from at least Tesla that probably only are going to be poached to make cars. That's the safest way I can put it. And I wasn't ready to run with my story, but when Business Insider ran its piece, I figured it was time to go ahead and run with what I had. Another thing is that it seems like here in Silicon Valley, the C-suite pretty much thinks it's a given that Apple's working on a car. That's incredibly circumstantial. But as I put it in my piece, if you're going to crowdsource wisdom, starting in the C-suite in Silicon Valley is you could do a lot worse than starting there at the very least. And I think that I think Apple's doing this. Doesn't mean they're going to release a car, but I think they're working on one.
Wow, that's an interesting statement. They're working on one, but they might not release it.
Well, so what do we know about Apple? We know that very few products get said yes to. Very few product ideas, services, features, whatever. Very few things are said yes to. I hate saying it that way, but most things someone's saying no. That's Apple's strength, unlike every other company on the planet, it seems. And we also know, and this is from Steve and I want to say Tim Cook, over the years have made comments to the effect of, once a product reaches a certain point in development, it almost always comes to market. Very few products get to that point, but once they do, they're probably going to be released. I don't know anything about the details of what Apple is working on, but from a time perspective, I don't think Apple has had enough time to get to that point. So it's possible that Apple's working on something and that it won't be released, but I kind of expect it to happen.
I don't know what. I'm not even sure what to say to that. Because I try to think of what value Apple could bring to the auto market. I mean, let's just forget about the logistics of the auto market for a minute. Dealerships and distribution and all that. But just what would an Apple car look like? And what are the advantages? If it's an electric, great.
Did you see the graphic I included with my article?
Yes, the Cinderella coach.
Yes,
that was very cool. That was very cool. I guess that's as strange as this sounds coming out of my mouth. I'm having a hard time envisioning how Apple, what the kind of value that Apple could add to that market.
Well, what kind of value did Tesla add?
Well, that's just it. I mean, Tesla is an electric car. Tesla is an electric sports car. For the most part, a lot of performance and all that.
Well, no, Tesla started at the high end,
and it's coming down.
Their whole point is to start at the high end and then release lower and lower and lower and lower. I'm still moving my hand down. You just can't see it. Yeah. Cars for the sole purpose of making electric cars that are actually useful accessible by more and more people. Right, that's their whole point. So the high end pays for the development of the low end. Now the low end might actually still be, higher than most other car companies' low end, but Tesla is my whole thing is that don't think of Tesla as a high end sports car company. Think of them as an electric car company that started at the high end and is moving into to more and more entry level vehicles as time goes by.
Okay, so, I mean, Apple obviously has plenty of cash, so they don't necessarily need to fund the low level with the high level. They could probably skip to something that is mid to low level, and then when we're saying that, I assume we're talking about price.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I actually think that Apple doesn't tend to compete on the low end at all. So I don't know that Apple necessarily intends to like come out shooting with with a $20,000 electric car. I would imagine that an Apple car would probably start in the $40 to $50 to $70,000 range even, which is definitely where Tesla is still competing.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that they would come out and try to make it rock bottom. And there are, we can go off on the Apple Watch discussion too, and what they're trying to do there with the entry level or the lower level for that product versus the high end gold watch, which nobody knows prices on any of this stuff, and that's that's where I hate to waste a whole lot of time on things we don't know about. But this one just struck me as so interesting. Your article and the idea that there seems to be a lot of smart people out there saying that Apple is probably working on this. As opposed,
this story first crept up like what, a year and a half ago. I think it's when we first started getting rumors that Apple was working on this. I honestly didn't give it any credence at the time. I was a little bit shocked to learn the things that I learned just 2 weeks ago, but it changed my opinion on it. And it also makes a lot of sense. So one of the points I made in my article is that a knee-jerk reaction is to say that Apple has no experience in cars. Well, Apple had no experience in cell phones. Matter of fact, do you remember all the mainstream reports in particular that said that what does Apple know about cell phones? Apple can't compete in the cell phone industry.
Oh, sure. I mean,
right?
Yeah.
Because what does Apple know about that? Now, admittedly, a smartphone, an iPhone, is a computer, and Apple clearly has experience in computers. But that's actually kind of the point with cars too, because especially with electric cars, software is ever more important. And Apple happens to be one of the world's foremost authorities in software. And there's a lot that I think Apple can bring to bear on the software, both at the making the car run level, let alone on the interface level, actually interacting with the car and controlling it, and having it give you information and all those kinds of things. Apple can bring a lot to bear on this problem from that standpoint, and from the standpoint of like the mechanics stuff that Apple doesn't do. It's all fairly well understood technologies. As a friend of mine, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, well, they'd probably start with like, okay, let's do 4 wheels, and then let's have some axles, and let's have some drive shaft. I mean, we should probably use a steering wheel, right? I mean, there's some things that aren't like magic, that are really, really well understood. And another thing is that Apple understands batteries. And don't forget that Tesla is making their battery technology open source, which is something that Apple could benefit from. And we know that Tim and Elon Musk, Tim Cook and Elon Musk, who is the CEO of Tesla, a real brainiac, we know that they've met. We know that they know each other. We don't really know what they discussed or anything. If I can play devil's advocate, it's possible that Apple is working on some kind of car interface for iPhone, and that's all it is. Or that maybe Apple wants to make some kind of radio system for cars that they then turn around, some kind of like complete dash system that they then license out to manufacturers. That's possible too. The thing that got me though was that some of the people that Apple has been targeting are probably only making cars. That's what they do. So that's what really turned my opinion around.
It'll be interesting to see. I don't have an opinion because I don't have enough information. I mean, you obviously have information that I don't. You shared some of it in the piece. You probably haven't shared everything, and nor would I expect you to. It's almost like, again, poor analogy, but I'll go with it. The idea that Apple is building a television. I don't until, and of course the car market's different. I mean, for the Apple television, until the content that comes into your Apple television changes and the ability to break it out and get exactly what you want, unless they are building a back end and cutting deals with the content providers that can deliver some of that stuff. And maybe we've seen some of that now with the Dish thing, that you can subscribe to so many channels directly. That's I think one of the biggest developments we've seen up to this point. So maybe at some point it will make sense for Apple to make a television. I'm not sure it does right now, because I'm not sure that there's, aside from just the physical connection of the HDMI cable to your big screen TV, I'm not sure they can't do just as much, if not more, with that little box than they could with a full-blown TV. Your comments about the interface, that just feels like it rings a little truer than trying to do a whole vehicle. But who knows?
Well, so let's look at the other thing that Apple does. Apple enters markets that it thinks it can disrupt. Starting with the iPod in particular. That was a market that Apple felt it could disrupt, and it did. And then with music sales, Apple thought it could disrupt that market, and it did. Apple thought it could disrupt video sales. It did, probably a lot less effectively than everything else, but it did. Clearly, Apple felt it could disrupt the cell phone market. It did. Apple thought it could disrupt the tablet market, actually, in this case, invent a new class of devices, and it did. And by the way, for those who were watching, I don't mean that Apple invented tablets, because tablets have been around for quite a bit. But the way Apple did the iPad was very different from the way any tablet had been done in the past. And what they invented was a new way of using this device to consume information and eventually to produce content, to consume content and then to produce content too. Apple is in the process of disrupting the watch industry, and at the very least actually making wearables a thing, which heretofore they've been a concept but not a thing. And why wouldn't Apple want to, when you're making so much money that you literally can't get rid of it fast enough, you can't do stuff with your money fast enough, when that's happening to you, you can either coast or be satisfied, or I don't know, start making this huge mistakes, or you can make really big bets. And each time we've seen Apple make huge bets. The bet on the iPod was big. The bet on the iPhone was big. The bet on iTunes was big. The bet on the iPad was probably less big. I think that Apple's one of the things I've been harping on for the last couple of weeks is that I don't think people understand how much effort Apple has put into their Apple Watch straps, and what kind of investment in time and materials and people that all those watch straps represent. And the fact that Apple invented its own alloys for the Apple Watch. I mean, that's such a big deal. I mean, the Apple Watch represents a massive investment on Apple's part, and I think it was a really big bet. So what other kind of big bets can they make? Well, they're probably not going to start making toasters or refrigerators. That kind of seems a little bit too mundane for Apple. Although I guess they would if they maybe felt that they could disrupt it. But cars, I think, are ripe for disruption. The automobile industry has essentially been stagnant for decades. Been little improvements here and there. There's been jockeying of position. There's absolutely been some improvements that have come to market, but certainly electric cars are still not mainstream, not usably mainstream. And self-driving cars are going to be a thing. Google is obviously one of the leaders there. By the way, I learned, have you read Walter Isaacson's The Innovators? Have we talked about that yet?
No, I have not, and we have not.
Do you know the book though?
Yes, I do. It's on the list. I just haven't gotten to it.
A fantastic book. I'm I don't know, 4/5 of the way through it. And one of the things I learned is that Larry Page, when he was looking for dissertation topics, one of the ones he considered was self-driving cars, because he's been interested in that since high school. And he ended up going with search, obviously. That was where his dissertation took him. But self-driving cars have been in his sights for a very, very long time. And clearly, like I said, they're a leader there. but those aren't even a thing yet. They still can't function in a wide variety of environments. So, I mean, the automobile industry and the television industry, I think, are both ripe for massive disruptions because nothing has really changed. You only had window dressing. You've got, higher resolution, more channels. That's it cheaper, right? There's this constant race to the bottom in TVs. And with cars, we've gotten better industrial design. We've gotten lighter cars. A lot of weight saving has been happening in cars. A lot of power improvements have taken place in engines. But it's still pretty much the same automobile industry that it has been. So that kind of actually seems like it's perfect for Apple.
You make a great case. You make it when you put it that way. You absolutely make a great case. It's because there are parts of it that some of the stories I've heard from car dealers, that system, some of it works really, really incredibly well, and other parts are just so completely broken it's hard to believe.
Yeah, that varies from state to state.
Yeah, and line to line.
Yeah.
So, as always, this is one of those things we're going to have to wait and see. But it's fun to discuss and fun to find out what's going on in your head as to why you feel it's an issue or a possible issue. Has
Jim Dalrymple yepped or noped me?
Not so far.
I don't think a yep would be coming from Jim at this point. Apple's nowhere near ready to let out that kind of information. Oh, yeah. But I think that if Apple wasn't working on a car, they might possibly be interested in noping it.
Yeah.
So I am checking Jim to see if he's. What is it, Loop Insight?
Yeah, loopinsight.com.
It's good. It's a good thing I'm all prepared for the show. Jim, by the way, I love Jim, and Jim to me is the go-to authority. When Jim yeps or nopes something, I know that it's a fact.
Right there with you.
Yep. No, he hasn't. There's nothing from Jim yet on this. Now, John Gruber during Fireball said that he hasn't heard anything about it. About any kind of cars. And John is also very, very plugged into Apple. He's got some great sources at Apple. And Mark Gurman, who I think is one of the best rumor mongers in the Mac web, and I'm not using that as an epithet, he has not uncovered anything on this either. So, I could totally be wrong about this stuff. I think that I'm right, but I could totally be wrong. And it will be interesting to see what time brings us on this stuff.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. I'm proud to have lynda.com as a sponsor of MacVoices because what they do is so much in line with what MacVoices does. Helps you learn new things, expand your horizons, and expand your skill set. MacVoices does that by exposing you to people and products that can help you achieve your objectives. lynda.com does it by offering video training courses on an amazing number of subjects at a price that anyone who is serious about learning can afford. These are in-depth courses that don't just give you an overview of the topic or software, but go in-depth to give you what you need to implement and understand it. Courses on Photoshop, Excel, and WordPress can help make you more productive at the office. Courses in web development and photography can help you get more out of your hobby, and maybe turn it into a business. And courses in visual design and finance will give you better understandings of those topics that you need to help you grow. And that's just the start. Millions of people all over the world are using lynda.com to learn new skills, update existing knowledge, and break out into new areas they've always wanted to know about, but could never find the time. With lynda.com, it's easy. First, visit lynda.com/MacVoices and sign up for a 10-day free unlimited trial. Let's be clear on that. Free, no cost, no obligation. Unlimited, no restrictions. No courses that are off limits, no limits on how much you can watch for those 10 days. Pick one topic and dive deep into it, or skip around and sample lots of videos on topics just to get a sense of the amazing variety that lynda.com offers. Some of the most popular courses on lynda.com right now, and I say right now because new courses are being added weekly, include iOS 8, iPhone and iPad Essential Training, setting up your mobile office to work from anywhere, speeding up and maintaining your Mac, Swift Essential Training, and Code Clinic, where each month a code challenge is issued and authors share solutions using a variety of different programming languages. There's more than one solution to a problem, and Code Clinic proves it. I want you to invest in yourself in 2015, and getting started is a pretty small investment. A free trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. After you sign up, put some of the courses I've tried on your list, including Isotope RX4, designing the web, creating and protecting email links, and editing GoPro Hero photos and videos with Lightroom and Photoshop. That might give you some small idea of how diverse the topic offerings are on lynda.com. That's lynda.com/MacVoices for a 10-day free, unlimited trial to make 2015 the year you learn something new. Give it a try. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of MacVoices. Well, let's come back to the present a little bit.
Okay.
There are two topics I had in mind to kick around with you, and so we'll take the Apple topic second, and because that one may take a little longer. This one we may be able to knock out. But I think it's been interesting over the past, month and a half, a few months. Microsoft bought an iOS email client called, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, Accompli.
Probably Accompli, but whatever.
And from what I've read, and I don't know, but from what I've read, basically did some rebranding, maybe did a little tweaking, and released it as Outlook for iOS. Then we turn around and just more recently, Microsoft bought the calendaring application Sunrise because it didn't have one. And whether that will be released, almost certainly it will be released as something for Microsoft. This bothered me on a number of different levels. First of all, I don't recall. Microsoft way back when. Yes, I know Bill Gates bought, another system and, kind of brought it over and sold it as DOS.
Yeah. But, to be fair, he actually sold it first and then bought it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Which is a nice trick if you can do it.
It's a nice trick if you can do it.
But this just didn't feel. This didn't feel exactly like Microsoft. It also, part of me says, is this a desperation move that they recognize that they're so far behind in iOS that they have to scoop up some other products, rebrand them, and do it. Then I heard of a Mac Observer Daily Observations podcast with you, Jeff Gamet, and Kelly Gumont talking about the issues with Accompli, which is now Outlook, and how it shovels everything through Microsoft. And, that seems so Microsoft to me. And then they're now taking over Sunrise, which up to this point was my calendaring app of choice. And this is not an anti-Microsoft rant. It's just that we know how they handle data. And we were saying before the show, I use Gmail. I recognize the implications of that I'm sharing data with Google. For better or worse, Google seems to make no bones about the fact that I am their product and they sell information on me.
And that therefore makes it okay?
It makes it okay because it's disclosed.
Balderdash, man.
No, if I'm going to sell my soul for that much, then that's fine. But when Microsoft takes over an email client, and then it takes you and Kelly and Jeff and other third parties to determine that this is what's going on, and there's something, I don't want to say hanky-panky, but there's something going on with the data that I don't expect right up front, off the top.
Okay, but to be fair, most of the stuff that we were talking about involves enterprise security. We weren't aiming that at individuals. We weren't aiming our conversation at individuals. The problem with Outlook for iOS is that it's storing your data. It's allowing your data to be dispersed to various cloud storage services. That's actually a pretty good thing for most people. It makes it easy to get to your stuff. And that's great. It makes it easier to send and receive attachments. That's also great. Where the problem comes in is that doing that sort of thing is going to be against the security policies, the IT policies of a lot of enterprises. And our point was not to say that Outlook for iOS is bad. It's to say that if you're working for a company, or if you're an IT manager within a company, this product is probably breaking the rules of that company, and it's allowing the data to be in places that the company probably doesn't want it to be, and that's a problem. It's going to be a problem for people.
It's a problem for me. It's a problem for me though when with Apple Mail, with every other email client, as far as I know, it's between me and the company I'm buying my email service from and the sender. Okay.
Yeah, but again, here the problem is that so all right, you and I work at a law firm.
Okay.
There are strict regulations on client data. Oh, better yet, let's make it. We're doctors. Nice to meet you, Dr. Joyner.
Dr. Chaffin.
Yes, thank you very much. If you can consult later on a particular case, I'd appreciate it. But in the meanwhile,
I'd like to ask you what your specialty is, but we won't go there because that's just way too dangerous.
Okay, so you and I, because we're doctors, there are strict controls over what we can do with patient data. And I think it's something. This may actually vary from state to state, but most of the places, you have to. Patient data can't be on a service like, for instance, Dropbox, because it's sitting on Dropbox's servers, right? And you and I would therefore, as doctors, would not choose to enable Dropbox on Outlook. Because that is entirely within the user's control. It's customers have to enable Dropbox access. It's just that when you do that, you're allowing information to be potentially stored in Dropbox from your email client. And again, that's where you're going to be violating an IT policy. I mean, as a user, all you have to do is not enable it. If you have a problem with Dropbox or OneCloud or whatever the other one is that they're supporting, don't enable them. I don't. For individual users, I don't really see a problem here.
I guess it just comes back to my expectations, Brian. Is really what it amounts to. Is just I expect my email client to work a certain way because this is the way that all my email clients have worked, and it's really been more about the interface and the features. And now I've got something else, a security concern that, and I'm certainly not dealing in state secrets or secret formulas or anything like that, but it's just the idea that it's not the way I expected, and it doesn't seem to disclose that as far as I've been able to determine. And I may be wrong about that.
It discloses the fact that you can hook into Dropbox and OneDrive, I guess is what it's called. Yeah. And there's another service that they're doing too. It discloses that. It's just, I don't know. I've had beefs with Microsoft through the years, uncounted. This isn't a particular beef I have, except for it seems sloppy in that their biggest Outlook customers are obviously enterprise customers. Outlook, for all its foibles, and Exchange in particular, which is the server side of the Outlook empire. There's a lot of things to complain about it, especially from a user interface standpoint, but it does corporate email really well. And so it surprises me that they would not have paid attention to these things that are going to matter to enterprise. That is surprising. But as an end user, I don't really have a problem with any of these things personally. Okay,
so let's shift it around to the other part of the comment that I made, and that is that this seems to be something new for Microsoft. Is it sloppy? Is it desperate? Is it just that they're trying to get into a space that they should have been in a long time ago, and were either ignoring or their leadership was assessing it wrong? Why do this now?
Most of the things that Steve Ballmer did were wrong in terms of long-term success for Microsoft. Steve Ballmer was very focused on maximizing revenues and profits from Windows and Office and Exchange, and I don't know, maybe Xbox if they ever finally made a profit with that. And he was very good at that. Microsoft made a lot of money with Steve Ballmer as CEO, but that money came at the expense of progress. I think we've talked about it before, you and I, but Microsoft became became exactly the kind of company that Steve Jobs talked about when the product people go away and the sales and marketing or the accounting people take over. Everyone starts trying to protect the cash cow. You want to perpetuate and protect the cash cow, and you tend to either shy away from things that threaten that cash cow, or even outright squash them, as Microsoft did with Courier. A very interesting product, in my opinion, Courier was. And that was a huge. Those things were all huge mistakes, in my opinion. And under Satya Nadella, we're seeing a new side of Microsoft. One of the things Steve Ballmer tried to use Microsoft's cash cows as bludgeons to extend themselves into new markets. That's actually something that Microsoft did really well under Bill Gates. But the problem is that it didn't work in mobile. And all Microsoft managed to do was to turn its own cash cow into a mess by trying to leverage it into mobile and trying to use mobile to keep people with Windows. And it's just this big catastrophe. And what Satya Nadella is doing in comparison is he has a stated goal of turning Microsoft once again into the we're everywhere company. We're on all the platform companies. And he's not going to try to make Office be the reason why you go to Windows Mobile. Instead, he brought Office to iOS. And now he's bringing Outlook to iOS. And these are signs of a sea change within Microsoft. Now, whether or not he's executing entirely, well on all these things, maybe not. But I think that it represents progress for Microsoft. I think this is actually a good direction for Microsoft if Microsoft is going to continue to do anything at all.
I hope you're right. I mean, I genuinely hope you're right, because I would like to see Microsoft become a viable player and a respected player again. And just they still have, at least they have ways to go to get my respect.
Oh yeah,
and
a long ways to go.
And yeah, and I don't know about you. I mean, maybe you respect them more than I do. Maybe you.
No,
yeah,
not really.
And that's that we're entitled to our opinions. But I would like to see them get back, because the resources they have, and there's so many good people at Microsoft, and it's just I don't know why they can't seem to get out of their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? So would you be comfortable now using Outlook? Would you be comfortable using Sunrise, whatever it gets rebranded into?
So I'm not a Sunrise person, and I'm not an Outlook person. Would I use it? Probably not. I don't want to go with the Microsoft product. Certainly, I haven't needed it yet, but I would certainly use Office for iOS. But I'm not interested in switching from Mail.
Okay.
To certainly not to Outlook. I've never been an Outlook fan. I think this version of Outlook is probably the best version of Outlook Microsoft has ever done, but it doesn't particularly appeal to me.
Okay, and I'm not going to use Outlook, and I'm looking at alternatives to Sunrise just because of the concerns I voiced earlier. Not because I think. I mean, the product, I really like Sunrise. And folks, if you haven't tried it out, it's probably worth a look. But it's also worth a little follow-up once it gets rebranded and released as whatever Microsoft rebrands it and releases it as to how your calendar information is being handled.
Sure.
So, last topic.
Yes.
I've been calling this to myself the Apple Doom machine.
Yep.
you and the Mac Observer are well known for the Apple death knell counter.
Yep.
Bryan, why is it? In fact, Ted Landau and I talked about this before Apple's quarterly results were released, not knowing that we were being a bit prophetic. That that everybody's still claiming Apple's doomed. Apple's doomed. So Apple comes out with the best quarter of any company ever, anywhere, ever.
Anywhere. Yep. In terms of profits.
In terms of profits.
There are tons of other companies bringing more money than Apple.
Yeah, but
they just don't make as much profit from it.
Right, and then we see that they have achieved the biggest market cap ever.
Only in absolute terms, not in relative terms.
All right.
Microsoft's market cap from 1999, right before the dot-com bust, right before the dot-com bubble burst, was, I think, in the equivalent in today's dollars of close to 900 billion. Okay. Certainly over 800.
Okay, so Apple's on the way, but the point is that these are really huge numbers, and yet there's still people that are out there saying, here are the reasons that Apple Watch will fail. Here are the reasons that Apple is doomed because of the Apple Watch or the Apple TV or whatever. And I'm just fascinated by it. That is it strictly? I'll ask you the same thing I asked Ted. Is it just link bait, or do they really believe this stuff?
I don't know. Some of it may be link bait. I think that most of the people actually do believe it, though. I have to play devil's advocate, though, to start off with. Saying that Apple's incredible financial results right now are the proof that the doomsayers are wrong, I don't actually think has merit. Again, look at Microsoft. Microsoft never made more money than under Steve Ballmer, right? So by that very same metric, criticism of Microsoft is ill-founded because Microsoft is making so much money. And okay. we both, probably agree that Microsoft under Steve Ballmer became a stagnant, crappy, bloated company that made terrible product decisions, right? So Apple's making a lot of money, but I don't think that necessarily means anything. In this case, it does mean something, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And that's because at the heart of most of the current Apple is doomed nonsense that's out there is this idea that Apple can no longer innovate. And the reason why Apple can no longer innovate is because Steve Jobs is gone. That's what these people believe. And that actually drives me nuts because it ignores reality and it ignores facts. And I as I was working on Death Knell number 67, it occurred to me that a lot of the Apple haters have entered into territory where they take it on faith that Apple must fail. And so as Apple continues not to fail, because they can't shake their faith, they must double down and go ever deeper into their faith and retreating into their faith, despite all evidence to the contrary, which is kind of what we do when those of us who have faith in something, for many of us, when that faith is challenged, we don't lose that faith. We actually find new ways to have that faith. I think that's the way humanity works in general. And this starts going back to the PC wars, the platform wars, where Apple, there's one way to do computers. That's to make an operating system so that everybody can license it, and then you make money, and then some computer people may make money or may not make money, and Apple is not doing that. Apple's making its own proprietary hardware, and we know that's the incorrect way to do things because Microsoft proved it at the end, right? That was the narrative for I don't know, 15 years at least with Apple, maybe longer. And of course, we actually see that Apple's Mac business has never been stronger. 25 billion Macs, I think in 2014, fiscal 2014, or maybe it was calendar 2014, were sold. 25 million Macs. I mean, golly, I remember when hitting 1 million a quarter was just awesome. And Apple's Mac business has been growing 31 out of the last 32 quarters. and that they've gained market share in a market where everybody else is losing, not only losing share, but actually losing unit sales. So I mean, that's just incredible. But people can't shake this idea. You know, some people can't shake the idea that Apple is doing it wrong because they're not doing it the way Microsoft did. And they just can't let go of that. And so they still see things through that prism. Well, and then we have the innovation thing. And that's the thing that drives me nuts. We first started getting the Apple can't innovate anymore about a year after Steve Jobs died. People were saying, oh my God, Apple hasn't come up with any new products. It's been 3 years since the iPad was released. Apple can't innovate anymore. Well, that's just stupid. I mean, that's like IQ of 75 level stuff. I mean, it's so remarkably dumb for anyone to have been saying it at that point. For one thing, at that point, a year after Steve Jobs died, anything that Apple did, Steve Jobs would have had his fingers on. So even if Apple did release something innovative in the first, and in my opinion, in the first 3 to 5 years after Steve Jobs died, that's still not an indication of anything because Steve Jobs probably had his fingers on it. Now we have the Apple Watch, and it turns out that Steve was not involved with that, right? But Apple has released the Apple Watch, or I'm sorry, has announced and shown us the Apple Watch. We know that it's coming in the next few weeks, and it's sometime in April. Actually, is what Tim Cook recently told us. So we have an innovative product called the Apple Watch. We have innovative services, Apple Pay. We have Touch ID, which is an amazing innovation. We have all these innovations on battery life that Apple has been bringing to market very quietly. We have innovations in the processor world, what Apple has done with its ARM processors and bringing it to 64-bit and making it ever more powerful and ever less ever more energy efficient. These things are amazing, just absolutely amazing. The stuff, like I said, with Apple Watch, the amount of innovation represented by those straps is, for someone like me who's very steeped in the watch industry, it's staggering what Apple has been able to do before it has even entered this market. Apple invented a new interface. This is yet another interface that Apple has invented, one designed to make wearable computing actually usable. No one else has done that. No one else has done that. Just like no one had made a smartphone interface that was awesome. BlackBerry was like the king of smartphones because theirs was the least crappy, and they did email really well. But it wasn't, the interface as a whole wasn't good. They were still using physical keyboards when Apple came up with the iPhone. I mean, Apple has innovated so much in the years since Steve Jobs died, some of which he was involved with, some of which he wasn't, that any one of those innovations, if it was coming from another company, would have been oh my God, this company is amazing. But the Apple haters can't see that somehow. So like we had last week, we had 3 pieces. We had this piece from the Harvard Business Review written by a professor of either business or economics, I forget which, and I'm so unimpressed with him I haven't bothered to go to look and try to figure that out. And he said that Apple is now a follower because it sold all these iPhones, and the only reason why it sold all these iPhones in the December quarter was because it had a big screen. This is why Apple sold 74.5 million iPhones. And because Samsung released and already made big screens a thing, Apple is a follower, and therefore Apple can't innovate.
That doesn't even follow.
It does not follow because Touch ID, Apple Pay, iOS 8, reachability, HomeKit, Health Kit, continuity. Oh my goodness, continuity! Being able to get your text messages on all your devices. I mean, there are so many things that go into why Apple had a great iPhone quarter. Now, large screens are part of it. You know, Apple finally releasing a large screen device and meeting that pent up demand is a great thing. But it's not the only reason why Apple sold 74.5 million iPhones. And it's just. As I said, it was the best written yet most poorly conceived article I'd read about Apple in a long time. It's just stupid. Joe Wilcox a man I consider a friend. He used to cover Apple when he was at CNET. He has turned into this biggest Apple hater of all time in the last few years, and I don't know why. He piled on saying, yeah, this guy over at Harvard Business Review, because he's at Harvard, he pretty much backs up everything I've said. Apple can't innovate. They're doomed. And then we had Peter Cohan, not to be mistaken for our friend Peter Cohen of iMore, formerly of Mac Central, formerly of Macworld, and formerly of The Loop. Not that Peter Cohen. It's Peter Cohan. He wrote this piece that said six reasons why Apple doomed than you think. And here's the beauty thing. The foundation of his article was 21 months ago, I said that Apple was doomed. And looking back at that article, I see that my reasons are more valid than ever. Despite all evidence to the contrary, he didn't say, but despite all evidence to the contrary. And his biggest thesis is that Apple can no longer innovate. It doesn't make any sense. It requires faith to believe that Apple can't innovate at this point, because the facts say that Apple does innovate. The facts say that Apple has never been more innovative than it is right now. The facts say that Apple is bringing innovation after innovation after innovation to market. That Apple is innovating on the supplier side. That Apple is innovating on the energy consumption side of things. That is what the facts say. And so these folks, though, they cannot accept that. So they must double down. They've turned it into a religion in their own head, something that they believe in, that they have faith in, despite all evidence to the contrary. And it drives me nuts too. That was an immense monologue, man. I'm sorry.
No. I think I hit a soft spot or some kind. No, I mean I agree with you, and that's why I guess I'm a little fascinated by it. That's your explanation is a good one, and it's one I've got to think about because I hadn't considered that because I keep looking at these and my interpretation has been link bait, or somebody just deciding, okay, everybody's flying this flag, I'll fly this flag, just to see, who will follow me. Because your points about making the money are really good ones. I guess I'm looking at the market share, and I guess in my head I'm factoring in the innovations, and I think there are innovations going on that are not customer facing. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, in the supply chain, in the manufacturing, that if you follow Apple, you hear about it through sites like the Mac Observer and other folks who look behind the scenes. If you're just a customer, that's actually
one of the things that the haters will latch onto is because they're trying to screw reality into fitting into their worldview. They'll say that Tim Cook is a supply chain genius, and that basically that's the only thing Apple can do anymore is do stuff in the supply chain. So that's like the bone that they throw to reality. But you're right. There are massive innovations happening there, and there are other massive innovations that are happening that we're not necessarily seeing because Apple is so quiet about some of these things. But Apple Touch ID, HomeKit, and HealthKit, all those four things are all going to be really big deals. And they're all going to be very disruptive. And I think that the Apple Watch is going to be disruptive too. These are major innovations. And to have these things happen in plain sight and still proclaim that Apple can't innovate is just, it's astounding to me. It is astounding. It's like at this point, it's denying man-made climate change. It requires the same amount of faith as denying global warming. It's like looking at the snowstorms as proof that the Earth is not hotter. Well, that's not what the facts say, and it requires faith to believe otherwise.
You make me feel better because I said at the outset I haven't understood this, and again I've got to think about a little bit, consider what you're saying, because it in an environment and amongst people who I think I tend to think of as reasonably logical and reasonably well reasoned, and they analyze things, they think them out, they think them through. This just seems so wrong.
It's like at this point believing that President Obama is a socialist, despite all evidence to the contrary. Poke the bear. Poke the bear.
So
Wake up, sleepy bear.
We've hit religion. Now we're hitting politics.
Well, I couldn't get a rise out of you with the religion thing, so I thought I'd go for the heart.
I'm not going to rise to the occasion. I'm just going to let it go, because that'll turn us into a whole other podcast.
Probably, I would join you on that podcast.
Yeah, maybe that's when we should start.
Yeah. That's an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've only got what, 3 now? 2?
Well, I mean, Jeff hosts I'm on one of those, but not always. Well, we can call it Bryan is right and Chuck is wrong. Enjoy. That could be the name of it.
How about just Bryan and Chuck argue? Enjoy.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I'll give you top billing. No,
I'm not thinking, but you're the best, man. You're the best host. You are the best host in podcasting.
Thank you, but I don't.
You are the best host, especially when you have a multi-unit panel. I marvel at your ability to handle the 3 and 4 people, 3 and 4 and 5 people.
I think you're trying to make up for me for the Obama comment.
No. I'll stick to that one.
Okay.
I'll stick to that.
Oh, good. I don't know. It's always fun, and it's fun because, and I've said this since the day I met you, that I have such immense respect for you and for your analysis of things.
Thanks, man.
I always want to kind of know what's going on inside your head about it. I may not agree with it, but it always gives me pause, makes me think about it in a little different way that maybe I haven't before.
Fair enough, and thank you very much. And you know how much I respect you too.
Well, and folks, I'll tell you what, if 2 podcasts that you should go and check out. You definitely should go and check out the Apple Context Machine.
Please.
Pardon me. And the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. They're 2 terrific podcasts. There's some fun going on there. But there's a lot of good thinking, a lot of good analysis, not just rehashing of news, but good analysis. Again, you may not agree with it, but it'll make you think.
And if you don't agree with it, you can have faith that you're right.
Yeah. Or join me and yell at your iPod or iPhone or whatever you're listening on every so often.
Let me ask you this: how often have you actually yelled at your broadcast device when say me and Jeff are talking?
A couple times.
That's awesome.
A couple times, yeah. That you've gotten. It's like you guys have got it so wrong.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, and those are the ones I should call you guys up and say, let's get together, because I really want to debate the
totally,
outside.
Man.
Yeah,
totally.
Bryan, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for the time.
Man, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, Chuck.
We'll do it. We'll try to do it more often in 2015. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Notables on Mac Voices. Come back and join us. You never know who might show up, and you might never know how right or wrong they might be. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.